Well, welcome, and thank you for joining our webinar discussion on public, private, and fully managed cloud services. Let me introduce to you some of the key members of the team. First, I am Leslie Ferris, Global Data Vault Territory Manager for the Eastern Time Zone, working with both end users and managed service providers. Today, we're so happy to have a special guest from Veeam, Tim Hudson, who is a certified Veeam architect and a trusted partner we continually work with on a regular basis. In order to stay within Veeam's guidelines of the 3-2-1 rule, 3 copies of your data, 2 different media, and 1 offsite, GDV recognizes there are a range of options when choosing a cloud provider for your offsite backups. Therefore, we thought it would be beneficial to differentiate the various types of cloud offerings to help you determine which is the right option to include in your organization's DR plan. We'll start off describing the pros and cons of public, private, and fully managed cloud providers with a deeper look into how they handle your data, especially during a disaster. We'll also try to provide strategies on how to pick the right one for your business and give situational examples of what we've encountered throughout our DR experience. Finally, we'll walk through what makes Global Data Vault stand out amongst our competitors. As for our speakers today, I'll kick it off by introducing Will Basich, Global Data Vault CEO. Will founded GDV roughly 15 years ago.
Thank you, Leslie. As Leslie mentioned, I'm Will Basich, CEO of Global Data Vault, and we built the organization around the idea that it's always our problem. Hopefully, we can explain a little bit about what that actually means today in our conversation, which will be led by Brian and Tim. I'd like to introduce Brian Brignac, Global Data Vault's Director of Sales, who has been with us from the ground floor and helped Global Data Vault build the great business that it is so immensely. And Brian has a deep understanding of the technical issues because he comes from a technical background, as well as great ability to help customers develop and lead to a solution that will solve the backup, disaster recovery, and business continuity needs that Global Data Vault is continually solving. Also, I'd like to introduce and express a lot of gratitude to Tim Hudson from Veeam. Veeam in general has provided us with the very best technology of anything we've ever worked with from any outside vendor, period. And not just the very best technology, but also the smartest group of people that we've had the opportunity to work with, and the most helpful group of folks that we've had the pleasure to work with. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian and Tim, and look forward to hearing your conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Public cloud is the buzzword right now. A lot of people use it. It has elastic growth. It's self-service, but there are some pros and cons to that. So just to kind of give you a little bit, of a story. We've had customers that have left Global Data Vault, went to the public cloud, contacted us back, and said, hey, it worked out really good, but it was extremely costly. It is self-service, but it's basically a do-it-yourself platform. That's the kind of the feedback that I've gotten. But I know Tim, that he deals with this a lot. So I'm going to have him elaborate a little bit more on what he's seen from public cloud with the pros and cons. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. So Tim, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I've spent my career in technology. We've seen the public cloud grow in terms of footprint across the globe. And you're right, plenty of folks are dipping their toe or jumping to it, all right? And we know that is sometimes easy to start. You just got to have a credit card, a billing address, and you can get going. But Brian, what we continue to see in the field at Veeam, and what I've seen just from a technology perspective, is that doesn't necessarily make it the right decision. I'd question whether an organization has the expertise to successfully run in the cloud. And when I say successfully run, I don't mean just make servers. Make servers of the right size and shape, at the right cost model. When you click the drop down, if you're building a new VM, there's a lot of options, 100. What's the right one for you? That can be quite challenging. If you pick the wrong one, you might get burned in big dollar amounts. Again, quite challenging. From a safety and security perspective, numerous challenges exist. It's very simple to get started, but some of the identity access management concepts can be challenging to grasp. If you didn't come with some public cloud background, it can be hard to get that education without real effort. Or perhaps users and administrators of public cloud services might have high dollar costs themselves also, with so much experience perhaps. So we've seen plenty of scenarios, again, just like the ransomware concept. It's so easy to Google or see in the news presented to you a situation where someone got burned because they didn't control their identities and roles correctly, or somebody got burned because they've left an S3 bucket exposed to the public that you didn't want to. And these are all real scenarios. And so commonly, I do also have similar conversations with service providers, end customers, and just my peers on Twitter about what's the right decision for somebody in a given scenario. It's complicated. I've spent most of my career working with service providers like Global Data Vault, and I think we'll continue to see their success due to the complexity, challenges, and risks for leveraging the public cloud. Not to say that it doesn't work, like you mentioned, right? We're going to turn on these systems, they're going to turn on. But when you hit that drop-down menu to try to purchase services, if there's 75 options of what to do, it can be difficult to pick the right one for you, to be really confident. And again, I think that's why private cloud continues to have a good spot for organizations and individuals of all sizes and shapes, and same with service providers.
Yep, great points, Tim. And again, I want to, we're talking about public cloud, and there are some organizations, that's their mindset. They're going to go there no matter what. And if that is the case, Global Data Vault and Veeam can still protect that, because the misconception is, oh, it's at Microsoft, it's at, AWS. They must be backing up my data. They're not. That's an extra cost. So take that extra cost and associate that with the vast array of options when you try to go into the public cloud. And then the other thing is, we run 2 major data centers. Things happen. So now you've relinquished everything to the public cloud. You've trusted someone else to run your infrastructure, to run your day-to-day operations. If something horrible goes wrong there, now you have to get in line, if you can find the line, because it's going to be you and many others are trying to find that line to get into. So there is some definite negatives on going to the public cloud, but as a fully managed service provider, we want everybody to come to our cloud, but we understand that there is a need out there. And if that is the case, Global Data Vault can back that up. But just be aware, like Tim elaborated on, there's a lot of variables in this. And just from experience, and I've been personally in the DR space doing this for 15 years as a tech and then on the sales side. So I've heard both sides of the aisle. It's extremely expensive. So, just be aware. And again, the manpower to deploy this and pick the right options is a daunting task. So
Hey, Brian,
thank you, Tim. That was great insight. So now let's go ahead and move on to the next slide about private cloud. What is private cloud? It's more of a, infrastructure as a service. It's more of a, hey, I'm going to purchase this environment from this data center. It's highly customizable. You get some dedicated management. You do have a higher level of support. more so than on a public cloud. But again, extremely expensive. And stories from my side of the fence is we have a customer that's got 13 sites. One of the largest sites, they felt they wanted to go to, private cloud, infrastructure as a service. So they've taken that one site and brought it there. And then after several months, just some of the feedback, yep, it works. But here again, we found out they're not actually backing up our data. That's an additional cost. Now I have to purchase attached storage to that infrastructure. That's driving my cost up. Even though they've tried to gear away from that, having to repurpose hardware every 3 to 5 years, or whatever that time limit is, to keep their infrastructure up to speed. It's extremely expensive. So again, I'm going to flip it over to Tim. He's going to elaborate a little bit more about private cloud, and then we'll go ahead over and move on to the managed cloud. Take it away, Tim.
Yeah, thanks again, Brian. When I think about private cloud, it brings me personal joy. I've been a vSphere individual, a vSphere technologist since I came into the industry. I think anyone watching this is probably familiar with VMware from the length of time their organization has leveraged that company's software. It's extremely common in the field. 90+% of Veeam's customer base leverages something like vSphere in order to provide their own private cloud services. One of the concepts we're talking about today is leveraging that private cloud either on-prem or buying a hosting provider's infrastructure as a service, maybe not a hyperscaler, but a smaller organization's infrastructure as a service, and using that for their backup management, remote backup storage, or maybe even DR as a service. And it's quite a compelling reason. I mean, when you think about it, compared to some of those comments I made on the public cloud section, the experience is much easier to obtain in this perspective. This is the stuff that folks have been using for a long time, that they're generally more familiar with. So the experience is there. But I think there's, like you mentioned, plenty of scenarios where we'd question whether that's really what we want to be doing in 2021. Lots of folks that I work with as customers or partners of Veeam are questioning whether they want to have multiple data center facilities, because they've got to pay for things like either high cost of a managed infrastructure as a service, or they still feel like they're getting nickel and dime for paying for HVAC, electricity costs, individual servers or big server farms, lots of software licensing, big storage arrays. These are huge capital expense items sometimes, and that can be just as much of a burden as the 90-page public cloud bill that says, that has a line item for 0.0000 something, but you've got 10 million of those, These things can still be just as challenging to deal with from an IT management perspective. Additionally, if you're in private cloud, generally speaking, you're still on the hook for the expertise, the management, the software updates, the vendor relationships, and so on and so forth. If IT's your business, maybe it's great. But if IT's not your business, maybe you want to concentrate on something else. And I know we're kind of leading into the managed services arm, but I mean, that is the continual feedback we hear, again, in the field from my technology past, is these are tough questions. They're big dollar amounts. It never goes down from year to year. It only goes up. So yeah, Brian, I think it can be just as complicated a decision for any organization, especially if they really get educated and if they really think about what they want to do. Managed services works very well for a lot of folks to take some pressure off themselves, to focus on their core business, to work with a group of experts. And I think we're gonna go on and talk about that in a few more minutes, right?
Yeah, exactly. But great points about the private cloud. I just want to make, just kind of elaborate just a little bit more on that. You're right. The secondary data centers or the tertiary data centers, at some point they have to look at, what's our return on our investment here? Because if they're not an IT company, somebody has to maintain that infrastructure, the cost of that data center. And and especially if it's under infrastructure as a service. But here's the thing: if you're relying on infrastructure as a service, and as your primary production model, they have issues too. So when that issue does apply, either you're lagging in performance, you're down until they can resolve the problem, and again, it takes manpower. And the customers that have come to us that were in that environment, once they look at, hey, this is what I'm paying for my data center now: power, air condition, somebody, I have an employee or two maintaining that infrastructure. It's cheaper to let, and I'm going to say GDV to do it, but I mean, that's going to be any managed service provider that, especially, this is what we do. This is all we do. We think we're a specialist at this. So when something does happen, we're quick to it. We know what to do. We have the manpower. We have dedicated resources for those infrastructures, where others that just have that secondary site, they're hoping everything goes well, but when something major does happen, it does stretch their resources, so that it's taking away their core business model as far as what they're trying to do. So, but yeah, thanks for that feedback on that. And then now, let's go ahead and talk about the fully managed DR cloud is, and that is where Global Data Vault thrives. This is what we do. We can give you the highest level of management, the expertise, and with Global Data Vault as partnering with us, either as an end user or an MSP, from what we understand, and this is coming from Veeam, that we employ the most Veeam engineers as a Veeam cloud service provider, and we also have 2 Veeam architects on staff. So we think we are the pros at this, and again, not taking away from Tim, because we do work with those guys hand in hand as far as development and this and that and bugs and so forth, by partnering with the cloud providers such as Global Data Vault. It's much more cost effective. It's hard to compare us to what a public or public cloud or infrastructure as a service, just because of the sheer fact that this is our niche, this is what we do. So as far as partnering with us, you get much more of a white glove type of solution. And we've gotten feedback after feedback after feedback in a disaster or crisis or even a hack. It's been instrumental as far as the reliability. Pick up the phone, call Global Data Vault. This is what they do. They're responsible for everything, and to remediate whatever that crisis is, and to get those customers back. So just, again, it's the high level of the folks that are working with you, and it's the expertise behind everything that drives our success. And again, I'm going to hand it over to Tim, and he can kind of give you a little bit more insight on what is a fully managed DR cloud.
Thanks, Brian. I mean, where I would start in our conversation here is that it is so important to recognize that specifically what you do as GDV is focused on these specific services. Any provider might have 19 different offerings, but this is a real focus for GDV, and that helps from a partnership perspective when I work with the team. You're not lying in terms of the volume of folks you have that focus on Veeam, and from a certification standpoint as well. these are the things that really help us partner together to deliver great services to the customers watching this webinar, or potential customers watching the webinar. We have a dedicated engineering staff, to help the partners across the globe. And it's through these partnerships, I think, that we help you deliver really excellent and differentiated services. There's not a lot of Veeam customers that have dedicated Veemers to help them, like none. And so that you have such a level of partnership from an engineering standpoint really makes a big difference. That's important for us from a service provider perspective, because we showed in that slide earlier, folks are using Veeam on-prem or in the cloud. And so if you've got the expertise to understand how to deploy, configure, manage, replicate, recover from an ultimate disaster, that's incredibly beneficial for the end customers themselves. All right. And also from a comparison and pricing standpoint, I'd agree with you. It can be difficult to compare. Sorry about the little intrusion here. It can be difficult to compare because oftentimes you make this quite simple. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, but from a pricing perspective, we mentioned that it can get really brutal in the public cloud scenario. Do you find that, do folks come back to you, Brian, and talk to you about how difficult it is to read your bill? You showing them a 90-page bill?
Not at all, Tim. I mean, when we started the business, we wanted to make, this very simple. So, we tout simplicity when partnering with Global Data Vault, as far as, getting you onboarded, pricing, a fixed cost model, and not to nickel and dime our customers. We want it to be very simple process. And you're right, excuse me. With Global Data Vault, this is all we do is Veeam. We don't sell no other platforms for backup and DR. We're not going to sell you any other services. This is it. This is our core offering, and we've strived to be the best at this. And it also comes from working with guys like Tim, that have helped us all on the way. And then our guys are constantly communicating with, Tim and development team there to better improve things that we've tried to incorporate outside of Veeam, that intermingles with Veeam to make it a better platform for a fully managed DR cloud provider. Because Veeam sells software, we do the service side. So, we think the two together, and the relationship, has been a really good partnership for the both of us.
Yeah, I think we have a couple of questions to answer. I see coming in from chat. One of the questions I want to address is, do I get security from my public cloud provider? They told me my data was secure. I think that's true, depending on perspective, right? Sure, the data's secure from the perspective of, I don't think anyone's going to walk into an Amazon data center and steal a hard drive. We got that covered. You're paying for that. Is your data protected from a internet-based attack? Can somebody log in with your account? Are you leveraging multi-factor authentication? Are you leveraging a security system to advise you when there's odd behavior from an account perspective? No, and no.
Right.
I think that's all very clear. That's the user or the customer's responsibility, and I think that's a little different with what you guys are doing on the GDV side, right, Brian?
Absolutely. We know, partner with Global Data Vault, we know the measures and the tools that we put in place to protect our customers' data. And you're right, going back to the public cloud, yeah, the actual facility is secure. You probably can't get into the cage, for whatever reasons. But when the customer configures this self-serve model, hey, here's your VM, I need, this group here to have access, and then it accidentally opens up something, certain port that allows public interface to go in and out. Yeah, that you're right. That falls on the customer, not the provider of that public cloud. So Kelly, to answer that question, it's it's secure to an extent, but it boils down to the configuration of the environment. Yeah, how secure is it?
Yeah, and Brian, let's riff on that for a second. Answer this second question I see about what if my organization already has a backup team? Do I need a managed provider? In order to riff on the last comment to take us there, I'd think about that expertise discussion we had earlier. Yeah, I think you can totally secure your data in the public cloud if you know what you're doing and you do it right. But like we mentioned before, that education might cost money, time, effort, people you don't have, time you don't have, education dollars you might not have. That could be a risk. If the question was more specific here, it says, I got a backup team. Do I really need to use a managed service provider? I would certainly say that there's value when there's such expertise at that provider. If an organization thinks they've got a lot to learn, or they want to have their staff focus on something else, or they want to allow their staff to grow and change and service the business differently, then service providers can fill that gap. It doesn't have to be, all inclusive. It can be specific. You've been discussing about how specific the GDV offerings are. I think there's plenty of room for an on-prem staff and service provider services.
So Tim, you and I both know. I mean, you're in the technical space now. I come from the technical side, and you're right. I've known organizations that, I have somebody take care of my backups, but he also does 10 other things. So backups tend to get less important as his workload expands. But let's just go back to what happens if you have a disgruntled employee, that is driving the keyboard with that domain admin credentials. They can do a lot of damage that's, irreversible. Let me just burn down the backups, whatever, So again, by partnering with the cloud provider that takes those measures, with the Veeam Insider protection and enhanced data protection, that way, if something like that does happen, you're still able to recover from an internal hack like that, or an employee's that disgruntled is on his way out the door. So hopefully, Kelly, that answers the question. We kind of touched briefly about the expertise. What I want to do now is just kind of talk a little bit on how Global Data Vault and Veeam work together. We employ the most Veeam engineers of a Veeam cloud provider, 2 architects. We thrive at that. They webinar it, they go to classes, they do all this training. So we are proficient and experts at the Veeam side of things. And I believe the two together, is a really good mix. Tim, do you want to kind of elaborate in a little bit more on the Veeam architect side and the relationship between the two?
Yeah, I'll just say that it's something that's reserved for the largest service providers on the globe, right? Specifically to this geo, we'll say for me, who do I focus on? The largest providers in North America. And yeah, you guys are at the top of my list, I'll tell you that. So this is why we have such a close working relationship. It's things to help build GDV services based on what Veeam can offer, but also the feedback loop goes the other way, where you help educate me on what you want to offer or what we can do better, and together we go back and work with the Veeam product team.
Yep.
Veeam products continue to be enhanced and improved. We've got version 11 coming out soon, and it's this relationship that we leverage so that you get the best educated ahead of time, during, and for future products coming from the Veeam side. And Brian, it's reserved for only the most special folks. So yeah, it's great collaboration between us.
Yep, we agree as well.
And what we're going to talk about in this slide and in our conversation in the moment is a possible scenario, and one that is common in the industry today. It certainly was common in 2020, probably going to be common in this year as well. And this would be that while organizations do as much as they can at any given time to protect themselves from attacks, technology issues, technology complications, inevitably there's a possibility of an issue. So this is why things like Veeam do so well for organizations as we protect folks' data, take them offsite, provide DR as a service strategies or just DR strategies in general. Veeam's a very common tool, 450,000 customers or so today across the globe. Veeam's a common tool to leverage for this type of data protection. But again, I mentioned, there's always the possibility of something unexpected happening. And again, like I mentioned, let's consider a possible ransomware attack. And a worst of the worst case scenario, a ransomware attack, or maybe crosses from a production infrastructure to your backup infrastructure. And once they get there, is there a possibility that they can affect all this data you've been protecting, this data you've stored for potentially days, weeks, months, or years? And of course, the Veeam toolset has capabilities and security suggestions, or what we call generally hardening suggestions on how to protect your infrastructure. There's always a chance that it's not enough. And so one thing that I find so interesting and compelling working with the Global Data Vault team is that they go above and beyond the standard Veeam set of guidelines and capabilities built into the software, and above and beyond those standard set of guidelines from a security and hardening perspective to provide our joint customers extreme protection, or in this case, enhanced data protection. So I went through there, a possible scenario. Maybe you've experienced it, or maybe you've Googled or just watched the news and seen a negative situation that somebody's been in. But Global Data Vault does something different. Again, above and beyond the standard things that we as the data protection vendor provide. So Brian, what are some of those things or that you do that's extra and above and beyond what Veeam provides?
Sure. Thanks, Tim. So you're right. So everybody watches the news and they see all the municipalities and the hospitals getting hacked. And we all know Veeam is a great platform. It does very well. But you're correct. I mean, if someone gets hacked and they get access to that Veeam console internally, and they have the keys to the kingdom, what is the protection from that? That's something that we've looked at as a data protection provider and said, you know what, we need to do something to ensure that we have a reliable platform that in the event something like that happens, can we recover that customer back? So Veeam, of course, in 9.5 came out with the Veeam Insider Protection, which is great. It's basically an invisible copy repository that Global Data Vault will take and keep 7 days of backups at all times. And so basically, it's a little bit of an air gap technology. It's offline, not visible to the customer, only the Veeam cloud providers. And what happens, going back to what you were saying, that attacker gains access to inside the platform. They go and say, oh, look, they're backing up off site. Well, everybody knows if they can recover from off site, they're never going to pay that ransom. So we looked at that. So what we do, so we take that invisible copy in our infrastructure. So anything that gets deleted from an internal hack on the live production repository, if they delete that, the customer is still protected by in what we call enhanced data protection. So we're taking Veeam Insider Protection and we're wrapping some other tools around that. But we're going to cover a little bit more about enhanced data protection in a couple of slides. But look at the expertise. I mean, you want this to be a painless transition to whatever platform you're going to, whether it's public, private, fully managed. There's a lot of variables that go into this stuff. What is your expectations, on your SLAs, uptimes, RTOs, RPOs? When something goes wrong, how is the support level? Is it going to be, an order taker that's got to pass this along? Hey, am I going to be able to test my stuff? And how secure, is my data in your infrastructure? So, and then let's talk a little bit about the RTOs, the uptimes, RPOs. Look, a lot of people tout uptime. Our data center is up 5 nines, and you know what? That really, in global data vault size, yes, we thrive for that as well. We can match those numbers, but what does that really tell you? That doesn't tell you anything about your data. It's yeah, my data, it's up, but can I get to it? Can I recover? Those are the things that really need to be addressed as far as when do I need to restore? How long? My RTO. What's my recovery point? Is those things going to happen when I need it? And then that's kind of where Global Data Vault comes into play. We're going to focus on RTOs and RPOs. We do that with a lot of monitoring, a lot of reporting. Nothing against Veeam, but you get that backup report. It inundates you with so much information. I think people get complacent at those reports. They look at them so much, they start just sending them to a folder, create a rule. Okay, now you got to dig into it. We try to make this really simple. We want this to come across as, wow, that was pretty easy. A run a backup job, is it successful? Yes, that's the main thing. Yeah, but we really focus on, if something happens, can we meet the RTO, RPO? So at Global Data Vault, we use, RMM tools to monitor disk space, the jobs, the firmware, if we're supplying a vast array of stuff. But again, all that's all fine and dandy. But when I need it, is Global Data Vault going to get my data to me in that time and that recovery point? That's the main objective here, for Global Data Vault. We do that several different ways. You get that daily email. You can always log into the web portal and get that single pane view anytime, 24/7 to check the status of the data. But we'll go to the next slide, Leslie. But this slide here really gives you the details where we dig down into it. Again, 5 nines, yeah, that's all great. But we want to look at is RTO, RPO. And you can see in this graph here, it gives you a lot of information, number of servers, protected storage, how many are monitored, blah, blah, blah. But the main thing is we want to look at the green section to the right. Local, yes, I'm in RTO, RPO, and remote. And I want to emphasize, if you are already a Veeam customer, you bought your software, you're running the local backups, and you're looking for that cloud provider, at Global Data Vault, we're going to come right out and tell you, we want to know what's happening on both sides. Some of the other providers say, yeah, that's your responsibility. We're going to take the cloud side, and we're only going to be responsible for that. So if things are jacked up on your side, you need to sort that out amongst yourselves, and we're responsible. Not with Global Data Vault. We're going to, white glove this approach from the first onboarding call, which is about an hour call. We want to make sure everything is functioning properly there, because if you're having problems on that local side of the aisle, that's going to probably translate to having issues on the remote side. So that's more what our team is focused on. We're definitely quality driven as far as what we're looking at in these reports, because you see list servers, but it's all about the last recovery points and SLA times. And then at the bottom part, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this, is the enhanced data protection, where we take the Veeam insider protection, that separate offline repository, and then we start stacking jobs there. So in the event of that internal hack, or even an accidental deletion, they were driving it, and then all of a sudden, oh, I didn't mean to delete that backup jobs. Well, we always have that second layer of enhancement to go to. All this is reported. You can get that again in the email or web-based at any time. You can actually see these statistics. That's readily available. On top of the reporting mechanism that we generate with this information, we also put an emphasis on testing. We want to assure that, this stuff works when needed. There's several things, we can do. We do an annual DR test, which is a full-blown test. We do a quarterly automated DR test, which is essentially for the Veeam power users. If you're using Veeam, it's like Sure Backup that you can do locally within the Veeam local infrastructure. We kind of mimic that on the cloud side, where it just spins them up, it sandboxes them, it does a ping test and a bottleneck network test. We do that, we automate that, we document it, we pass that report off to the customers, and then they sign off on those quarterly tests. So that's just one phase of the test that we do. Let's kind of talk a little bit more about the RTOs, RPOs with replication. Veeam touched the 15-minute rule on replication, and when we get these calls, it's the language that, we need to clarify, because, a lot of people, when they get Veeam, I'm going to replicate off-site. Well, are you replicating with Cloud Connect, or are you going to do that true VMDK or VHD replica? So we just want to kind of dig a little bit more in that. But with Veeam replication, the true replica, that local recovery point is as short as 15 minutes. And then offsite, that RPO is a 1-hour RPO. And then let's go to the next slide, Leslie. This is a little bit of a diagram on our security. And again, we know this is a lot of information, but it's pretty simple. To the left side, you'll see the customer's primary infrastructure, and this varies, depending on the customer. Everybody using Veeam is backing up locally. That's what Veeam does. Then you pick a cloud provider. That data goes off to that cloud backup repository. But this is where we separate ourselves from the competition. We want to make sure that, in the event they get hacked and somebody burns down the backup repository, or that disgruntled employee, whatever it may be, we thought we had to be different, to assure the success of our customers' data. So we take that enhanced data protection, which is Veeam Insider Protection, and then we've wrapped some tools around that, which we will get into, a little bit more. That information is going into the portal that you receive. And again, we covered, you can get that on the web, you get it in the email, and it's even mobile friendly. That information is in that report, and you can see at the bottom part of that scale, those are the EDP, the enhanced data protection files, that has been a lifesaver for several customers. And I'm going to be brief. I know we're pushing the time limit here, but one of the stories, which was one of our most recent MSPs, they got hacked, got internal access, and they did exactly that. Burned down all the backup jobs on the repositories. And it was multiple repositories. It was like over 100 customers. And they literally called us the next day and said, look, without that enhanced data protection, we would all be looking for a job today, and we would be out of business because we just lost, So, that was a huge win for us, to be acknowledged that, that was a lifesaver. So that's just part of this. That's just some of the steps Global Data Vault takes to go above and beyond, be different, be able to, no matter what, that customer can feel assured that that data is protected with Global Data Vault. And that's just one of the things that, we do with that. But not only is that insider protection in place. We also, to kind of, assure that we're going above and beyond, we've actually partnered with a software as a service company that monitors our customers' repositories. It's not just a monitor, it's a monitoring remediation tool. So anything starts happening with that repository, the file extensions start getting changed, any encryptions, anything starts getting massively deleted, they immediately kill the network, pick up the phone, call us, and then we will reach out to the customer to help remediate. So that's just some of the things, as far as security with Global Data Vault that we take seriously to protect our customers' data. This is what we do. We're a fully managed white glove service. DR as a service is our core offering. We do backup as a service. We do Office 365. We take the extra steps. With that air gap strategy. We can cover any platform: VMware, Hyper-V, physicals, and then local and remote. And again, I want to emphasize local. Even if you're not a Veeam customer and you're new to going to the cloud, we, as an organization, we're going to take ownership, and it's always our problem is our motto. So that local side that is technically your responsibility or that MSP's responsibility, we feel like it's our responsibility to make sure that you're getting what you pay for. In the event something horrible, we don't want to say, oh, you know what, the local side of things was messed up, so it's really not our problem. That's just not the approach we take as an organization. And it's never been our business model.
Thanks, Brian. And Brian, Tim, great job covering that. I think we've heard about security, we've heard about technology, we've heard about the expertise from both Global Data Vault and Veeam that back this up. Coming back to the fundamental idea, we cannot simply say, oh, well, we can't do that recovery because, look, it was Microsoft's fault. That's what we mean by it's always our problem. And I hope that what Brian and Tim have explained today talk to you, or speak to you, convey to you the idea of how we go about taking that level of responsibility and ownership of the problem of protecting your data. So thanks again for attending. And I think I'll flip it back to Leslie to see what questions are out there.
There's just a few questions. I'll take this one first. Does GDV support the whole Veeam portfolio? What about backup for Office 365?
Absolutely. We're a full Veeam shop, so anything they offer, we implement and take responsibility for. So DRAS, replication for those shorter SLAs, RTOs, RPOs, Office 365. So yeah, we cover everything Veeam related.
Fantastic. So here's a question. If somebody is using the public cloud and they have some data up in Azure or AWS, is there a way that they can back up to a managed service provider like GDV, or is it something where they have to completely stop and then do a full switch, or is there some way to hybrid that?
Great question. So we kind of covered a little bit about that. They don't back it up, so we can back up anything with the Veeam agent that will have to be installed on that VM. They will have to purchase a little bit of storage for that backup copy job and local backups there. But absolutely, anything in public cloud, any Global Data Vault, we can get that offsite protected.
Okay, great. I'm going to wrap this up with one last question here. This has been a wonderful webinar with a lot of information. But if somebody was just starting out trying to figure out which direction to go, do you have like a top 3 itemized list of things that they need to really consider when picking public, private, managed service, hybrid? What are the 3 things businesses need to really look at in order to make the right decision for them?
That's wide and deep. But from my side of things, look, I'm happy to have the conversation, and we may not be a fit. you know, and that it wouldn't be the first time. You know, it's just a conversation. You know, I mean, cost is a big factor, you know, in all three of those phases. From my experience, going to a managed service provider like Global Data Vault is much more cost effective than any other option there is. But you know, some companies, they want to put applications on the cloud, which is fine, and keep their domain controllers and file servers, you know, on-prem. So there's a lot of variances. It's going to depend on what the customer's expectations are.
Yeah.
See if it's a fit.
Cost, in my mind, it's cost, complexity, and like any really big project, always begin with the end in mind. Make sure that you have a vision of how the thing's going to work, test it out, figure out what pricing looks like. There are quite a few interesting wrinkles along the way as you will look at public cloud, and I'll leave it at that.
Tim, you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Because I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I'll reiterate what Will said in different words. You have to understand your requirements.
Yep.
If you make your decision requirement driven, you'll find the right thing. Like Will says, cost, complexity, or manageability, big factors. You got to understand what it is you really need, and I think you'll find the right solution.
Yep. And then from my side, you know, that conversation with those three topics in mind, Global Data Vault definitely more cost effective. The complexity, you're basically partnering with experts that can take this from start to finish and make it a painless process in between. And then the end game is, if something happens, you know, am I recoverable? Which is why, you know, reports and the testing, you know, and the relationship between that customer and Global Data Vault kind of comes into play. So we can accomplish all three. You know, it's just getting them to realize that. And, you know, when those calls do come, it is a long conversation because, you know, they're looking at all the options. You know, they're not focused on one. So, but that was a great question, Leslie.
Thank you, guys. Brian, Tim, Leslie, our off-camera team, Kelly, Trista, Allie, we really appreciate all your help today. And to everyone who was on the other end, who listened in, I hope it was beneficial for you. Let us know if we can help. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
And if you guys have any additional questions, just see us at sales@globaldatavault.com. And we'll be happy to follow up with you. Have a great day.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
We cover, you know, a wide platform with an emphasis on DRaaS. We also will do backup as a service. We do Office 365. We have our own tools that we've developed, which we call enhanced data protection, which we will elaborate a little bit more on future slides, as well as the cybersecurity emphasis that way to assure protection of our customers' data.